the city behind the walls, like it before it disappears. Subscribe before the gates close, and comment if you think you'd survive what comes next, because once you're inside this story, there's no guard coming to save you. The body was found just before dawn, slumped against a crumbling concrete wall painted with fading murals of saints and devils. His throat had been cut clean professionally, and his pockets were turned inside out. No alarms sounded. No guards rushed in. No sirens pierced the morning air. Inside San Pedro Prison, death didn't trigger emergencies, it triggered transactions. Outside the prison walls in La Paz, Bolivia, police officers stood frozen, staring at the iron gates like men facing a sealed tomb. They could smell the blood, but they wouldn't cross the threshold without permission. Inside San Pedro, permission didn't come from the state, it came from inmates. San Pedro wasn't a prison in the way the Western world understood prisons. It was a city, dense, loud, and violently organized, sealed off from the rest of society. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but inside the walls authority evaporated. Prisoners ran everything: housing, food markets, drug routes, brothels, and justice. If you had money, you lived in relative comfort. If you didn't, you learned quickly how pain was used as currency. The dead man's name was Miguel Rocha, a low-level inmate with no gang protection and no money to speak of. He had arrived 6 months earlier for a minor theft charge. Inside San Pedro, that made him invisible, and invisibility was dangerous. Investigators later learned Miguel had been sleeping on the floor of a communal corridor, paying nightly rent to stronger inmates just to exist another day. The morning after his death, rumors moved faster than facts. Some said Miguel had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Others whispered he tried to steal from the wrong cell block. In San Pedro, truth didn't matter as much as perception. Whoever controlled the story controlled the response. Police investigator Daniel Ibarra had worked murders across La Paz, but this case unsettled him immediately. Every instinct told him the crime scene was contaminated beyond recovery. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses were coached. And the prison's internal leaders, men serving life sentences, were already shaping the narrative before Daniel could even step inside. When he finally entered San Pedro, escorted reluctantly by guards who refused to go any farther, the air changed. It smelled of cooked food, sweat, and fear. Children played in courtyards, children who lived there with incarcerated parents. Vendors sold electronics and groceries. Music echoed from hidden rooms. It looked like life. But Daniel knew better. Every smile was strategic. Every movement was watched. He was approached almost immediately by a man known as El Gato, a prison broker who controlled housing assignments. El Gato spoke calmly, confidently, like a city official welcoming a foreign diplomat. He expressed regret over Miguel's death, insisted it was an internal misunderstanding, and suggested the prison would handle it. The message was clear. Outside law was not welcome here. As Daniel pressed for answers, doors closed around him, literally and figuratively. Witnesses vanished. A potential informant was found beaten hours later. Someone wanted the investigation buried, and they had resources Daniel couldn't see yet. Then came the detail that changed everything. During a quiet walk through Miguel's former sleeping area, Daniel noticed something carved into the wall behind where the body had been found. A list of names, dates, and next to Miguel's name, a symbol used by one of San Pedro's most powerful internal factions, a group known for enforcing order through silent executions. Miguel hadn't been killed randomly. He had been marked. And if that mark meant what Daniel feared, then Miguel wasn't the first victim, and he wouldn't be the last. But when investigators demanded access to the cell block controlled by that faction, the answer came back cold and final. No entry, no cooperation, no mercy. And behind those locked doors, something far worse than a single murder was waiting to be uncovered. The economy of fear. By nightfall, San Pedro transformed. The daylight illusion of a functioning city dissolved into something darker, more deliberate. Corridors that buzzed with trade hours earlier now emptied into shadows. Candles flickered behind barred doors. Somewhere deep inside the prison, a man screamed once, short, sharp, then silence swallowed the sound whole. Investigator Daniel Ibarra stood near the entrance, watching guards seal the outer gate, knowing full well they wouldn't open it again until morning. If Miguel Rocha had been marked, Then his death was not punishment. It was procedure. Daniel had spent the day chasing fragments, half-statements, glances held too long, hands that shook when money changed pockets. Inside San Pedro, fear was a currency more powerful than cash. It decided who ate, who slept indoors, and who disappeared. The murder wasn't a message to the outside world. It was an internal audit. Through a prison chaplain who still dared to walk the corridors, Daniel secured a whispered meeting with a man known only as Luis El Maestro Calderon, an accountant before his conviction, now a numbers man for one of San Pedro's ruling factions. The meeting took place in a former classroom, chalkboards still stained with faded math problems, irony thick in the air. Luis didn't look dangerous. That was the point. He explained the system calmly like a lecture. In San Pedro, every inmate paid. Not to the state but to the prison itself. Housing fees, protection fees, work permits, even access to medical help came at a cost. The factions enforced balance. When someone failed to pay, they were removed. Quietly, Miguel, Luis revealed, had stumbled onto something worse than debt. He had been moving laundry between cell blocks, an innocent job, when he noticed numbers scratched into fabric tags. Codes, delivery schedules, payment totals. Miguel didn't understand what he'd found, but he asked questions. And in San Pedro, curiosity was interpreted as threat. Before Daniel could press further, Luis froze. Footsteps echoed outside the classroom. The door creaked open just enough for a shadow to spill across the floor. A voice spoke softly from the hallway. "Time's up." Luis vanished through a back exit and was gone before Daniel could stop him. The next morning, the prison woke to another disruption. A small fire in the east wing forced inmates into the yard. It was controlled quickly, too quickly. Daniel recognized the tactic immediately. Distraction. While attention focused on smoke, something else moved unseen. By the time the fire was out, one of Daniel's key evidence bags, containing photos of the wall carvings near Miguel's body, was missing from the secured office. No forced entry. No witnesses. Just gone. The message was unmistakable. The prison was watching him. Outside the walls, pressure mounted. International NGOs had begun asking questions. Journalists circled. Officials demanded results. Daniel's superiors hinted, politely at first, that this case was becoming inconvenient. Then a body turned up. Not inside San Pedro, but in a drainage canal 3 blocks away. The man was identified as a former inmate released just weeks earlier. Jorge Alves, a runner who had handled deliveries between internal factions. His throat had been cut the same way as Miguel's. Same precision. Same signature. Someone was extending San Pedro's rules beyond the walls. Daniel realized the truth too late. This wasn't just a prison murder investigation anymore. It was a criminal enterprise operating in plain sight, protected by isolation, money, and fear. And if the factions were willing to kill outside to protect what was inside, then Daniel himself was no longer just an investigator. He was a liability. As night fell, his phone buzzed with a single unknown message. "Stop digging, or you'll be buried where guards can't reach." And deep inside San Pedro, a third name was being carved into the wall. No guards, no mercy. The carving was finished before sunrise. A third name etched into concrete, the letters shallow but deliberate, as if the wall itself had learned how to speak. Daniel Ibarra stared at the photograph on his phone, sent from an anonymous number that had no reason to help him, unless fear had finally outweighed loyalty. The name wasn't his. Not yet. But it belonged to someone even more dangerous to the prison's invisible government. Elgato. For the first time since the investigation began, the balance inside San Pedro shifted. Elgato had survived years by never being the face of violence. He assigned rooms, arranged protection, smoothed disputes. He was infrastructure. Untouchable. If his name had been marked, it meant one thing. The factions were eating their own. Daniel knew he had hours, maybe less. He moved fast, leveraging the one advantage he still had, outside pressure. International observers were scheduled to visit San Pedro within days. A scandal now would be catastrophic. Daniel made calls that burned bridges, invoking human rights protocols, media exposure, anything sharp enough to cut through the silence. By midday, the prison gates opened wider than they ever had. Inside, Chaos simmered just below the surface. Word spread quickly that El Gato was dead, or about to be. Some inmates fled their cells. Others armed themselves with improvised weapons. The economy of fear destabilized when its bankers panicked. Daniel pushed through the corridors with a small, uneasy escort, following directions sent in fragments. North wing, under the stairwell, old laundry. They found El Gato alive barely. He was wedged behind industrial washers, blood soaking into the concrete, throat slashed but not deep enough. A warning cut. A message. He was conscious, eyes wide with the terror of a man who had finally realized he was expendable. El Gato talked. He confirmed what Daniel suspected but couldn't yet prove. The killings weren't about discipline, they were about consolidation. A single faction was eliminating rivals and witnesses to take full control of San Pedro's internal economy. Before the prison could be reformed or shut down, Miguel had seen the ledgers. Jorge had moved the money. El Gato had known and done nothing. When Daniel asked who was giving the orders, El Gato shook his head. "You'll never arrest him," he whispered. "He doesn't live here." The truth landed hard. The power behind San Pedro wasn't an inmate. It was an external network: lawyers, corrupt officials, suppliers, people who benefited from the prison's autonomy. San Pedro wasn't a failure of the system. It was a feature. By the time paramedics reached El Gato, he was gone. But the damage was done. Daniel leaked everything: documents, testimonies, photographs, to international media. The response was immediate. Raids followed. Leadership structures collapsed. San Pedro was placed under emergency intervention, its self-governing system dismantled piece by piece. Officially, the case was closed. Unofficially, nothing ended. Months later, Daniel walked past the now silent prison walls, graffiti fading under fresh paint. San Pedro was quieter, cleaner, controlled. But power doesn't disappear. It relocates. A final report crossed Daniel's desk weeks after the shutdown. One line stopped him cold. Several key financial operators connected to San Pedro were never identified or charged. That night, Daniel received another message. No threats. No warnings. Just a photo. A concrete wall somewhere new. Freshly carved names. The same symbol. San Pedro had taught the world a lesson it refused to forget. When authority withdraws, order doesn't vanish. It evolves. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's still hiding behind the walls.